Hey, I'm Susanna Lanier, actor and acting coach for over 25 years.
I'm Jess Greenberg, casting director for over 10 years.
We're here to help you navigate this crazy, creative, and sometimes chaotic journey into the film and television world.
We share our insights as to what works.
And invite some pretty spectacular guests to share more ideas to move you on your journey.
So without further ado, let's get into the show.
Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with actor, director, and writer Lorna Kidjo. She's had recurring roles in TV shows such as Cinquième Rang and Plan B. And most recently, she's done the film circuit route for her short film, Oversight, which she wrote, directed, and produced. Welcome, Lorna!
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll jump right into it. So like Susanna said, you are a writer, a producer, an actor, director. So what came first? Like, how did this all happen?
What came first? Well, I guess what came first was just storytelling in general. I think when I was younger, I was pretty much like, I didn't have a very big, like, or very standard, like, family dynamics. So I was on my own a lot. So I wrote a lot. So I think I always wanted to tell stories. And when I was at my dad's, I definitely like wrote stories, put my friends in like little films that my dad was filming. So I think storytelling in general came first.
Okay.
And then I think maybe a silent dream of becoming an actor.
Okay.
And because it was kind of silent. I mean, I did theater classes in high school, but I decided to go to film school because it was also part of what I was interested in, but also kind of like felt more safe doing that than going to theater school, I think. So yeah, I think storytelling, writing, and then just overall filmmaking. And later on decided, okay, you know what? I want to be an actor. And then I did it. But yeah.
Cool. And so you grew up in Brussels in Belgium.
I did. Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so that's where you went to film school there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you decided to come to Montreal.
Well, so I have family my family's kind of spread out, and I have family in the US. So I used to travel to New York, and Brussels was never, it always felt limiting in terms of what I wanted to accomplish. So I knew from a very early age that I didn't want to stay there, but where I wanted to go was New York.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of like visa and all that, it was complicated. So I thought, okay, culturally, what's the closest thing? And it was Canada. I had never been to Canada. And originally I wanted to go to Toronto. Right. But I came to Montreal first for a film festival, and I made so many different connections that I went to Toronto, and a week in, I got a job offer on set. So I came back to Montreal, and I've been here ever since. But it was never the plan. It's just kind of like, wow, organically happened.
And cool. I want to know, I listened to your demo. So your French is from Brussels, but you don't have an accent.
Oh, in English, you mean?
No, well, you don't have an accent in English at all. You sound like, because I was listening to both demos trying to say, we wanted to ask the question, has accents like hindered you? And I'm like, she doesn't have one. Like I was really very close.
I used to though. Like my accent was much more strong when I got here, and then I just worked on it.
Okay.
Try and hide it as much as possible.
So your standard American accent is something that you've worked on too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Create.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And French, even French, not that you have a Quebecois accent, but you certainly don't talk that Parisian, like you don't talk like that. You talk more of an international, but like I have French students, and when they speak French, I can automatically pick it up. And yours, I said, there's an international vibe, but it's not like a
right.
So have you worked on that? Or
no, that's just how I grew up speaking French. And I think, yeah, like every accent, depending on who you surround yourself by, like it kind of morphs over time. Right. But I've never tried to change it or make it any other way. Like it's just how I speak. Yeah. But I definitely do not like have a Quebecois accent.
No, you don't. You don't. But and that's the question I had. Did that hinder you in terms of getting roles in French?
I do not work in French. I don't. Like the only one that I did.
Cinquième Rang was a huge role. Yeah.
It was. And that was very early on after I signed with Cha. But the role I got is the role of a French girl from France.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it
Okay,
was
that
great. It
makes
was a great
sense.
opportunity. But after that, I never got anything else. And honestly, I also like, because we had those conversations with Cha, and she was like, you need to work on your Quebecois accent. But I'm like, I'm not necessarily interested in working in that industry, not because I don't think that they do anything that's good. No, they do, but it's never been what I was drawn to. Like I
Mhm.
wanted
Okay.
to go to Toronto, I wanted to go to New York. I've grown up like influenced by more of the American culture in terms of like filmmaking than
Yeah.
anything else. So like that's not what I'm pursuing. So I've never done
Okay.
that work when it comes to French.
Yeah.
Okay. I get it. So if it
Mhm.
shows up for you, then of course you're going to take the part. And one of the questions was, has it hindered you not having the typical Quebec
And the
accent?
answer
You're
is
like,
yes.
yes.
Well, yes and no, it's so funny. The one question I get asked all the time is like when we have people with different accents, like from the Ukraine or like anywhere, like they come to Montreal. Do you think I should work on like a standard American accent? I was like, yeah, like probably. They're like, well, maybe there are roles that would require like a Ukrainian accent. I was like, it's possible, but like that's not what you're going to see every single day in a breakdown. But I think your clarity on like what you want to do and what you don't want to do is amazing. And if it comes cool where they need a French girl from
Hmm.
France or so I think that's so good, and a good reminder is like your clarity of your boundaries and where you want to go, and that helps
Yeah.
your agent and it helps you stay focused too, that like you don't have to do everything. You just have to be focused and clear on what you want. So
Yeah, and invest in the direction that you want to go into. So yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Hmm.
Amazing. So you said when you got to Montreal you got a job right away and you started working on set.
Yeah, I got a job on what was it, like a reenactment documentary show or something as a second AD.
Oh yeah, I think okay. So we worked together on that. I was like looking, and it
Okay,
was in.
that is why. You know what? Like that is why you show up in my text messages as like Jessica, and in parentheses I put
MJ.
imposter. And at first I was like, why did
Like,
I write that? And then I was like, oh, it was the show.
Oh my
that's funny.
God.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was the first thing you worked on here.
Yeah, that was the first thing. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow.
That was ages
Wow.
ago.
Ages ago, and like, yeah, that was probably something.
Yeah, I mean, I had I think 2 or 3 days on it, and that was it. But I met a bunch of different people, and then after that, I got a job in post production and visual effects. So
Cool.
I worked in visual effects for 2.5 years, but mainly to get my permanent residency because I just didn't want to. I wanted to do my own thing, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I did when I came here.
Amazing.
And that's
Very.
what we wanted to talk about, you doing your own thing. What's the process? How did you decide you wanted to write your own scripts? How did you go about getting grants? Like all that. How did that
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah.
Well, so I quit my job to get like I knew I was going to get my permanent residency, so I kind of planned it so that I would quit my job, go on EI, and have this like I think I had a stretch of 9 months on EI to be able to find an agent, take acting classes, and start building that. And I also ended up taking this like writing boot camp, the kids TV writing boot camp that was happening in Toronto. I was the only one based in Montreal, so we were doing it remotely. But so I did those two things during that stretch of 9 months. I found an agent and learned so much through that workshop boot camp
Hmm.
thing in Toronto. And I got my first agent by mistake because I think on casting workbook I had put that I was union, but I wasn't, and it was a
Oh.
mistake. That's how he found me. And then we had a meeting, and I was like, actually, I'm not union, but he liked me, and so I still signed with him. So yeah, so that's kind of how I decided to transition from a day job or more standard working way of life to taking that leap. And because you kind of have to do it as safely as you can.
Right.
Then after that I transitioned to like a part-time job because I wanted to have time to be able to keep developing my craft as an actor and writing and all of that, but I also needed to pay rent. So I found a job in a production house that was doing a lot of development for films. So I was a administrative assistant for like a year and a half or two. acting.
That's
That's
amazing. You've
great.
always kept, yeah, in the industry though. You didn't get like the part-time waitressing job. You're like, no, I'm going to find a job and use my talents and
Hmm.
build connections. And did it help having those part-time jobs that were in the industry in terms of networking and building connections and things like that? Or
Yeah, I think it definitely helped. It also taught me so much. Like I
yeah,
went to film school, but you learn so much when as you work. So yeah, I had never worked in development. I didn't know that, scripts needed to be optioned. That production house did a lot of like commercial action films. Like were not indie. They were like, we want to make money, we want A-listers. So I kind of like got it in on how all of that works too. And even as an actor, it was
mm,
interesting to see, okay, for those like types of films or even shows, it's not so much about talent as much as it is about making money and making it sure that you make your money back, right? So,
right.
yeah, I think I definitely make contacts, but more so I learned so much about the industry through staying in it while trying to make it as an actor.
Right. And
Yeah.
then you're just immersed in that environment of like, even I'm sure pitches and like scripts and all those things, like the formats, the
Hmm.
logistics of
Yeah,
all of it, which is
absolutely.
key also, of course.
Right. And so we did want to talk a little bit about the grant application because we haven't spoken to anybody about that on the show. And I think the listeners will be curious because everybody would love to get funding to make their projects. So,
Mhm.
how did you go about that?
How did I go about that? Okay, so I think what helped me greatly is that after working for that production house, I transitioned to Black Wealth Media. They
Okay.
were they had like a mentorship. It was the first year of that mentorship that I participated in. And through the mentorship, I realized that they needed more hands for the coordination of the whole thing. So I offered my services and they hired me. Mariah Inger, I don't know if you talked to her, but like,
Yes. Well, I
um,
haven't talked to her about it, but I love
okay.
Mariah. So, yay, Mariah.
Yeah. So she hired me, and
Okay.
for about a year and a half, I worked for Black Wealth Media. And what we did with my colleague is we had to look for a lot of grants to like renew that mentorship, but also for Henri Pardot, who owns the company, for his
Okay.
own feature films. And we got to talking to Sodec, to Bell, not only just like going through every possible avenue that there exists, but also having meetings with them, knowing that they are there to help us understand what's possible, and even sometimes try to tailor their own programs to fit what we are trying to do, like when it's like more of a mentorship than a film. But even for a film, like they will guide you, they're there for that, right? So through that entire process I learned a lot, and after that I could use it for myself.
Yeah.
I had submitted my first film that I wrote and directed through Black Wealth Media, and I did not get it the first time. And the
Okay.
second time, what I did is after learning all of that, I also knew that every institution kind of wants it, will, they have different things that they look at, right? You have to present your project in a different way depending on where you're submitting it to. So I had oversight, I wrote the script, I did the first draft of the grant application, and then I reached out to producers I knew to look at the budget to make sure that it made sense. Producers that already had received grants from that specific institution, and other artists that I knew were, established, to look at more of the content, as in like describing why I want to do this film, what it means, what my approach is as a director, for them to look through it and tell me, okay, is that what this specific institution is looking for, or should I frame it in a different way? And then I got it. So I think it's really about trying to understand how the system works, knowing that the institutions themselves are there to help you. If you have any questions, you can reach out, and then make sure that you don't hesitate. If you know people around you, or even if it's people that you don't know but you know of that have received grants before, just reach out. Most of the time, people are willing to help.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it sounds like it's the long game. Like it's not like, here's my application, like
No, for
here's
sure.
50 grand, make your short, have fun. Right. So when you did Fester, which was the first one, and I saw that one also, did you get funding for that one or did you self-produce that one?
um, I self-produced. I did a crowdfunding thing, and I think this one we made for like 10K.
Okay.
But
Mhm.
nobody was paid. Everybody was like helping. Yeah, and it wasn't a unionized shoot. Like it was a completely different approach. Whereas the second one, like we had a grant, it was unionized, which I wanted. I wanted it to be unionized, even though I don't think I knew how difficult it was going to make it for me financially. But I wanted to make sure that I hired as many people of color and women, and that I allowed them to also get their first credit, their first
Yeah.
actress credit, if I
Mm.
could. So it was important to me. But if I have, and I will probably direct another short, but I am not producing it. I did
No.
it once. I'm not doing it again.
So
Well,
yeah, because that is like the opposite of storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to be
Yeah.
focused on what you're doing as the director and not have to worry about, am I going to be able to pay my rent if I do an extra hour or not? Like I don't want to have to think about any of that. But
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, it's something. But you learn from every experience
Absolutely. Yeah.
and you're still doing it. It's not like it turned you off. I mean, you're still doing it.
I'm still doing it. Yes. You
Yeah.
just adjust. You're like, okay, I did it this way. Now next time I'll do it another way. That's just how it works for
Yeah.
me. But yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
you had a lot of success. I was like so impressed with how many programs and mentorships that you were a part of just in my own personal life. Like I never like went that way. And like I just didn't know what was available. And I guess I didn't even research those things. So like to me, it's so impressive that, whether it was your own, you knew to do those things, or if it was based from like on jobs or whatever, it's still amazing that you were involved with so many programs and had success, like a lot of success with these
Yeah.
programs, which is amazing.
Yeah, and it's been super helpful. And it's interesting though, because like it's not something I was looking for. I think it's weirdly enough happened in a way that was not necessarily comfortable for me. Because I remember when first time I came here, I was doing, I think it was like a theater class, and the teacher singled me out and was like, "Oh, you should participate. You should like apply to the Black Theater Workshop." And I was like, "Why are you singling me out?" Just because I think in Canada and in the US, there's a lot of incentives for like minorities and people of color, but it
Mm-hmm.
also means that then you put everybody into one box, which I was
Right.
not used to. I was not used to be defined by the color of my skin coming from Belgium. Like that was never. So I was like, I was taken aback. And then even being in those spaces, I didn't initially fit into those spaces just because of the
Okay.
color of my skin. So I was like,
Yeah.
why? But I also understood the value and meaning of it and how helpful it can be, even if it does put you in a very narrow box. Because I think being a person of color there's so many varied experiences of what that means for each of us. But it's definitely been helpful. But it's weird because the process of getting into that system was a bit clunky for me.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, it is interesting because it just wasn't your reality. So all of a sudden it's like, you should be part of the Black Theater Workshop. And you're like, okay, sure,
So,
because of, one reason only, because I have brown skin and curly hair. So go, and
yeah, it was
Yeah.
very
that's not
strange.
necessarily, yeah. Yeah, it is well, it's different.
Yeah,
It's just
definitely.
different. It's different
Yeah.
way. So you say about the value of having that though. And so what is the value of having these categories or boxes for that?
I think the value of it is that I feel like those spaces have been created because people that are part of those spaces have not felt like they could be themselves outside of those spaces, right? Like they could tell their stories freely while being heard and understood and supported. So I think that even though within those spaces we all have different experiences, what is always true is that there will always be support and a true um they just value you no matter what your story is. So I think it's just empowering. Those spaces are usually very empowering. Because like it took me a while to be able to actually speak my mind because I didn't necessarily agree with everybody or share the same, experience of what being a person of color was. And I felt like if I did speak up, then I would, I don't know, I just didn't always feel comfortable doing it. But once you do it, you realize, yes, like that's also okay. So I think yeah, that's definitely the value of it. And then in turn, obviously gives you confidence to tell your stories, to go towards like other types of initiatives like that can take you a step further. So
Cool. Now, I wanted to ask you as a filmmaker and an actor, you came a little later on. It was your sort of silent, you're a
yeah.
silent actor. Now you're a vocal actor. How come you never cast yourself in your films?
Well, I wanted to for the first one,
Okay.
Fester, but
Yeah.
they talked me out of it.
Okay. How
So
come?
when I
Who's
got
they?
into,
Who's they?
so Henri and Mariah.
Okay.
Right.
So when I first got into the program, it was the first year of the program. It wasn't super defined what we were going to do. So I thought I was going to write and act. And they were like, no, you're going to write and direct. I
Okay.
was like, well, then I'm going to write, direct, and act. And they were just like, no, you can't do that. It's going to take away from like the focus that you need to have as a director. And we had like I was not open at first. I was like, no, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. But they talked me out of it. And I'm honestly grateful that they did, because doing Fester, I realized how hard it is. And if you
Hmm.
really have a clear, like, even if you have a really clear vision of what you want to do, I really enjoyed just being able to focus on directing my actors. And it was also kind of empowering to give those spaces to other people too. Like, I love acting, but I don't have to be everywhere at once. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
I would never do it, but the only way I would do it is if I had a really strong relationship with a DP, maybe that could take on a part of the directing, you
Hmm.
know? But yeah, otherwise, I just feel like it's two very demanding jobs and it's hard to do at once unless you're doing a very like indie, like handheld camera, like really basic visual directing. But usually I want to do like a lot of, yeah, it's not what I usually do. So I think the combination of the two things, like if I'm doing genre and I want all of those camera moves and I also want this, like it's too much at the same time. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Right.
say.
Well, it is
Right. Because then it's
possible. Jason Sudeikis does it. So
I'm sure
on
it is
Ted.
possible.
So,
well, on Ted
like
Lasso.
exactly. So, he writes, they do improv, he's directing, he's the lead. So all to say, I think that was something that's been coming
Yeah.
into my head is like, if you know it's possible and it's something that you want to do, you'll do it 1,000%.
Yeah, for sure. I do think you do have to have a very strong crew to be able to
Yes.
do that
And I think it
properly.
Absolutely.
experience, right? Like that just, yeah,
Yeah.
like fluid confidence stepping in here, compartmentalizing everything. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I'll do it one day.
Cool.
So can you tell us a bit more about like Oversight, the theme, the storytelling of it all, and then what the process of this festival circuit and applying to those was like?
Yeah, okay. Well, so Oversight it's the story of a white woman who comes across another younger woman of color in a laundromat. And she realizes that she had a questionable encounter in the bathroom of the laundromat. And then they kind of like, she offers some guidance and later realizes that she also is linked to what happened in the bathroom. And so I think there's a few different themes. It's about the education of men, but it's also clearly about, how women of color move through the world versus white women. Obviously it's not everyone's experience, but from my perspective. And yeah, and it's about consent and the nuances of consent. In the story, you don't really know what happened in the bathroom, which is intentional. I think everybody's going
Mhm.
to project their own belief system onto it, but for me it was definitely not about rape. It was more about how we are taught as women to act a certain way with men, and men are taught unconsciously, obviously, that they can take and have whatever they want, and we don't know how to say no, but it still affects us in a way that can be very traumatic and damaging, even if it's not straight up rape. So that's what it's about. And visually, the approach, I watched The Invisible Man, the last one, which has nothing to do in terms of themes, but I very much liked, in that film there's a lot of like camera moves that are looking for the invisible man that you do not see and lead you in a direction, right? So I kind of wanted to repurpose that to showcase, and I wasn't able to get all of the shots that I wanted done in that way because of lack of time and a lot of other things, but I wanted to use those camera movements to symbolize that for the mother of the kid, there are things that she just has no control over. Like life will also shape you, like society will shape you in a way that like it's always one step ahead of her and she can't catch up. It's still going to happen. So that was the intention behind it. And then I'm very much inspired by horror. I love horror, and I like obviously how, for example, Jordan Peele uses horror, or like Michael Hannigan, The Haunting of Hill House, where it's like horror always has an underlying message, whether it's about grief, whether it's about racism. It's like using the tools that the horror genre has to offer to say something that is meaningful. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then after that, once we finished the film, I looked for a distributor, because for Fester, I hadn't had a distributor. I did the whole like submitting to festivals on my own, and it was a lot of work, and I didn't have a clear strategy, and it didn't bring me that much. So I was like, this time I'm not doing it on my own. So I submitted to every distributor that I knew in Quebec and outside of Quebec in Canada, got rejected by literally all of them. And then I reached out to this one distributor that's based in France. Usually the films that she takes on are, by women for women, but she's kind of like opened up her slate to more than that. But that's how she started. And she saw my film, and then she immediately said yes. So I went with her and have been working with her ever since.
Very cool.
Fantastic. Well, what I love about that story, again, all your stories about making your own film, it's the determination.
Yeah.
It's really like you keep going, you get rejected. I don't know if it's a redirected,
Redirected, we
often
could look at it that way, yeah.
redirected over and over and over, but you land where you're supposed to land, working with the right person. And the
Right.
redirection, though, it is that story, because Jess and I have a bit of an energy thing with the podcast. So it's the energy of the redirection where you're supposed to land, but you have to co-create and do the physical work along with the belief in your project needing
Yeah.
to get out there,
Yeah,
and it's the
and there was a
combination
lot
of the
of
two.
moments to just like, highlight that. There's a lot of moments where I don't even know why I'm doing this,
Right.
because it was such a personal story. It was hard to put on the page. It was hard to like put it out there for everybody to see. Like, I'm still not completely above water when it comes to how much we went over on the budget. And so this whole
Wow.
stretch of time of like getting rejection over rejection, or like redirection over like, after redirection,
Redirection.
um,
Yeah.
I just said, yeah, I was like, I'm not doing it again. Like there's a whole, like a good chunk of time where I'm like, I'm not doing it again. But
Yeah.
I think it's also just the process. Sometimes you feel down, sometimes, and then it comes back. If you don't, because obviously I still wanted it to go somewhere, so I didn't stop. But as I was doing it, I was definitely like not always the most positive about it.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
like birthing a baby. I
Yeah.
think it's so hard. That's what they compare it to. It's so freaking hard, but then you forget it and then people do it again.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like,
Well,
what the
Seattle did
hell?
that for me. I was like, okay, now I'm validated. It's okay. I can
Yeah.
continue.
Right.
Yeah, and now you're gonna do it again,
Yeah.
and thank God you will, because and I don't think it'll get easier, it'll just get different.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Or
that's totally
It's
true. And I
true.
think once you know that for sure, like, you believe that, you're okay with whatever comes your way, because you just know that, it's part of it.
it's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially
But
with a
that's
distributor too, like like you are handing off your like, baby child to someone to like sell it, and you need it to be represented like as if it was their own. So yeah, like you don't want just anyone to be like, yeah, sure, I'll take it on. And it's like, well, are you gonna care about
It's
it?
tr-
Like
it's true, but at the same time, like I had one option, so it's not like I could like pick and choose.
yeah,
So
but
I think
maybe
you
that's
also work.
fine.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's like, okay, this was meant to be.
sure. And also, I think you just make it work. Like you
Yes.
work with what you have, like, and you can
Yeah.
never know what a work relationship with someone you've never worked with before is going to be like, but you just
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are very resourceful. That's for sure. You're determined and resourceful for sure. With all the grants and institutions that you've like researched and spoken to, how much influence did they have on your pitches and how you had to tweak them? Do you feel that you could still express everything you want to express, or are you trying to fit into their mold of what they're looking for these grants?
I think you kind of blend those two things together.
Okay.
I always stay true to the message.
Yeah.
It's just how I formulated that changes, but the core of it doesn't. For my personal projects, I've only applied to calc.
Okay.
And with Black Wealth Media, we have applied to a bunch of different, like I think we did SODEC, we did Bell. even Patrimoine Canada, like the government institution. So, and for that, we did have to tailor what we were wanting to do when the mentorship and like the films that were going to come out of that to fit their bill. There was like a whole thing about promoting anti-racism. So we had to, it was about that, but you have to highlight those parts a little bit more, I guess, when you
Right.
apply for that specific thing. But it doesn't, it's not a lie. It's still true. Like we're still like trying to change that. But yeah, it's just like where you put the emphasis, I think,
Hmm.
depending on what type of program you apply to or what type of institution you apply to.
Right.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
that's what I was going to say. You don't necessarily tweak your film, you tweak the application to
Yeah,
highlight the parts of the film that are going to fit their vision.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I couldn't have
yeah,
said it
which
better.
that
Mhm.
that's what it sounds like, because Oversight, you didn't change the script, and the part white woman that I played by Suzanne Amanier.
I mean, she had a name. Her name is Erin.
Aaron, that's right. And but my character was ignorant, but in a like with heart. Like she didn't mean to be condescending or yeah, condescending, racist, let's face but it came across as sort of ignorant and friendly. It was just clueless. But that is, I think, what the majority of people are. That's the white by D is the default, you know what
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
mean? So, and then
Mhm.
everybody else is other. And so I think that was a perfect example and a perfect character. That character made so much sense to me because, I mean, I wouldn't say stuff like that so obviously, but I do sometimes, because it's just the society and the messages we're raised by. And it's only now that people are starting to highlight it. And it's so important in film and society to do that, that this is
Yeah.
actually racist, even though
And
we think of racist as like somebody bullying, getting beat up. That's obvious racist, but it's the subtleties that
mhm.
cause the extremes.
Yeah, and
We
that's
don't know
exactly my
that.
point. And through like Erin's character, but also through Ben's character, like I
Yeah.
didn't want to vilify any of the characters because the point was exactly that. We all try our best and we mean well, but there's so many things that is unconscious that we do and that perpetuate issues that we are all part of the problem, even me. Like
Yeah.
in whether it's about racism or anything else, it doesn't necessarily have to be about racism, but I don't know everything about, like I can't possibly know what the experience of a trans woman is. Like,
Yeah.
everybody will make mistakes, but the
Yeah.
problem lies in not being able to see it and correct it. Um, so yeah, that was the whole point also of making all of those characters somewhat likable, even though some people are like really do not like the character of Ben. But because I tried to make him as clueless as possible, because it's also my experience with men. Like a lot of them have hurt me or like done really fucked up things, but not in a way that was manipulative, just because they're completely clueless. But like it's
Clueless. Yeah.
scary how clueless they can be, but like that needs to change.
Yeah.
So, well, I was going to ask, like, after directing, writing, producing your own stuff, and also acting, how, I guess, has it changed your acting, like how you approach it? Has it changed your writing now that you have experience something like the night shoot? Has things
So
changed?
I think in terms of acting, not so much, because I went to film school. So I think the one thing I always came to acting with is the understanding of the mechanics and little somewhat organized but messy village that it takes to make a film. So I always knew my place on set,
Mm-hmm.
and when there is space for me to speak if I need to speak, or like I kind of like knew my place. So in that regard, I don't think it changed much to direct my own films because I had already done that in school. However, writing wise, yes, it did, because I think more my production experience, being able to like write my own things and understand how to set things in a way that could make it feasible without taking away from the story. So I think that's definitely part of why I write things that are contained, usually happen in one space.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the TV series that I'm writing right now, it's definitely more than one space, but it's mainly in one house. Like, I think in that regard, and like, even working visual effects or like all of those things that have definitely informed my writing to make it to serve the story, but not like decide that I want, I don't know, a huge Cirque du Soleil circus moment or whatever,
Yeah.
it's things like that. So in that way, for sure, it has definitely changed the way I write,
Yeah. You're writing more like a producer.
I guess.
Yeah.
But that's also a
Well,
challenge. And I guess it challenges your writing. You're like, how else can I drive this story forward without a scene that will cost $10,000
Yeah.
or
I mean, I write stuff that is usually about human
yeah.
relationships anyway.
Yeah.
So, the setting is somewhat secondary in a way, but yeah.
Could you tell us what you're
yeah.
writing on now, what you're working on now?
So I got the CMF grant last year. I'm a little behind on my deliverables. And so it's a TV series, it's a mini series. And yeah, it's the story of a young woman who goes back to her hometown after being away for a really long time when her grandmother passes away. And she ends up being stuck there and having to live with her mother. And they have a very toxic relationship. I have themes that keep coming back. But they work through it, and basically through that time where she's just has to like face um what she views as a failure in the city and face her childhood trauma and see how that has affected all of her relationships, specifically her romantic relationships, and kind of like working through that as she deals with like her grandmother's funeral, and they have to renovate the entire house that's falling apart. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, you've written all in English, right? Have you
Mm-hmm.
thought of writing in French? And I'll tell you why I ask. I've heard that, and maybe I'm wrong, it's easier to get grants in French living in Quebec than in English. Is that true or is that false?
Oh, I think it's true. I think it's
Oh, okay, good.
100% true. But I mean, I haven't really thought of writing in French just because it's a weird thing. Like, I think English is just my emotional language. Like, that's
Okay.
the language I just, yeah. And French is completely different for me. It's like a different part of who I am. So that's not instinctive, but maybe one day I will. However, even if I did here, my French is so different than the Quebec French that I don't even know if it would work, you
Right.
know?
Like even
But
like
yeah,
culturally speaking, like the
culturally or just like the expressions we use, the way we
Mhm.
phrase things, like I would not write for a Quebec person. It's like if I get a script for an audition and it's written by a French Quebecer, then I have to change the lines for it to fit the way I speak, right? So
Right.
I don't even know if it would work that well here, but maybe one day I'll try. It's just definitely not something that's instinctive for me, or like it flows less easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine. And you already said at the beginning that you're working on the English market because that's where you're drawn to. So
Hmm.
that's where you want to put your energy. And I totally believe in that. Put your energy where you feel strongest. Because even though it might be slightly easier in French, I'm guessing it's still hard. Like nobody's
Probably.
throwing out thousands of dollars for young people to go have fun and create stuff with. So do what you want to do and then put all your energy there. I think what you're
Yeah.
doing
But there's
smart.
definitely
It's
more
just my dream.
money put into like developing French stuff, which I totally understand. It's normal, but yeah, no, I'm just, and it's interesting too, like because there's less money for Anglos, but there's also, I guess, less competition. It's
Right.
that you
Mhm.
can make it work one way or another.
Cool.
Yeah. Any like main takeaways or tips for actors, writers, emerging?
For me as an actor, at the very least, the one thing that has helped me is to be able to do other things and like not put my eggs in the same basket and be as passionate about my writing as I am about my acting.
Mhm.
And to anytime I audition, like I audition, then I forget about it. I don't even think about it. Like it's just and so I never feel never feels like a rejection because I do what I have to do. I forget about it. If it comes back to me, great. If it doesn't, I don't even know that it doesn't because I've forgotten about it. So, and I think what allows me to do that is the fact that I can focus on other things that I'm passionate about. So I guess tips, if you can't find something that you're equally passionate about, I think it helps take the pressure off, because in acting, you simply cannot control what comes to you or what doesn't.
So, Lorna, we're about to wrap it up. What's next for Lorna? What are the big dreams? You've spoken about a show that you're writing now.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, but do you have any big dreams, goals, and like the big goals? Like, where do you see your career in 10 years?
Oh my God, that's
or 20 years? You can start with 5 if
I think so. Yes, I'm writing my own show. I have no idea if it's going to get made, but I think where I see myself maybe in the next 5-10 years, hopefully I have been able to create my own show. Who knows, maybe star in it. We'll see. And yeah, I think just create something that is meaningful and that creates change. I think I like to just like, I don't want to have a specific goal, even though now I do have this TV series that I'm developing. That's the main thing I'm working on. But just in general, I think I will be fulfilled if the things that I do in my life are meaningful and somewhat create change in a meaningful way. So whatever that may be, I'm happy with it.
Good. So it's like
Amazing.
open with the intention of creating change creatively.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lorna. That was amazing. We love that. Yeah. Cool.
Well, it was lovely speaking to you both, and I can't wait
too.
to listen to all the other episodes that I haven't listened to yet, because the first one I listened to, I was fully engrossed in it. So yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. There's some really good stuff. So for today's takeaways, 1, if you need part-time work, stay within your field to meet like-minded people. 2, the best education is by experience, so start creating. 3, put your energy where you intend to grow. And 4, having a strong purpose will fuel you to keep going. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to support us.
Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. You can share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and follow us on social media at Book the Room Podcast.
We put out episodes weekly, so subscribe.